There are many aspects in training, but one major aspect is the law of accommodation, and we're going to talk about that today. So the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, what is the law of accommodation? Well, the law of accommodation is one of the major biological laws that the conjugate system follows, and hopefully your program does too. But the law of accommodation states that a stimulus used for too long will no longer create a greater training effect. What does that mean? Well, it can mean reps. You use the same rep scheme, i.e. reps of 10 or reps of 20 or etc., reps of 5. It can also mean the same exercise for too long, and it can mean the same tempos for too long. You get my point. The point is, law of accommodation means doing the same thing over and over again will elicit a less and less result as time goes on. So how do we combat these things? Well, the big thing is that we're always changing, and so must our training. So what we have to do is we have to constantly challenge our body with new rep sets and all kinds of different schemes of training in order for us to make massive progress. One of the greatest things that we can adjust on the law of accommodation is the mode. So I'm going to write down the 5 different ways that we change lifting. The first thing that we change is the reps, right? If we want more hypertrophy, we up the reps a little bit. If we want less hypertrophy and more strength, we drop the reps a little bit. But in reality, we need something that's a sweet spot, and that sweet spot is 5s, okay? So for max effort work, when you're training, especially training raw, i.e. no equipment, 5s is gonna be one of your best friends because it's right in the middle of strength and hypertrophy. Go lower than 5s for too long, you're gonna be in central nervous system activation. You're not gonna gain too much muscle tissue. Conversely, if you go above 5s too often, you're going to be in the hypertrophy phase, but you're not really going to get any stronger. So above 5s is a little more cross-sectional muscle area, and below 5s is a little bit more CNS activation. Both of them are drastically important, but using 5s also for too long is going to be a big issue. So what do? We have 5s, right? Then we have 3s, then we have 1s. Right? These are things that we use for training. Sometimes we put 2s in the middle. But if you notice, like in Jim Windler's stuff in this 5-3-1, he is very, very smart in utilizing 5s, then 3s, then 1s for peaking. 2s usually are my biggest drop off. So I don't like to use 1s, but once every, blue moon. 2s tend to be a little bit better, in my opinion, because you're getting twice the volume you are with singles. But there are limitations to this. If you were to look at our training protocols for the last 2 to 4 years, when I was at my top for raw training, I would say that 5s were used about 75% of the time. Okay, so 75% of the time, we're going to need to be somewhere around the 5s in order for us to be stronger. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean we don't use higher rep ranges than that. We could go 6s, 8s, and 10s. But the problem with these higher rep ranges is we tend to lose the ability to strain one time. We've all met the person that can do 225 for 5 reps on the bench press, but we put 275 on there and we can't get it for 1. So you have to be very careful with using these higher rep schemes, but it doesn't mean that they're not usable, i.e. these will be definitely usable if the body is only used to this and under. So we come back to law of accommodation, basically stating that we need new stimuluses all the time. So this is one thing that we can do. We can change the reps. But as you can see, the reps have a limitation to them. They are only going to be adjusting the actual rep schemes in each set. Now, what's another way we can change this? Well, let's look at that. The next big thing that we can play with to help with law of accommodation is sets. So in max, we can take 6 sets to get to max, 8 sets or up to 10, but you can see that the range of those sets can only be so much. And why? Because our workouts can only last 50 to 60 minutes, or we're going to start overtraining just based on the length of time that the session takes. Also, if it takes us too long to train, then we're going to start increasing cortisol, dropping testosterone, really not making any new muscle. So a lot of it comes down to workout density. In speed training, you only have 6, 8, or 10 sets of those as well. So obviously you can see that we can really only adjust the sets in a marginal amount based on time parameters. Now, this is for the main lifts. For the accessory lifts, usually we don't want to do any more than 3 to 4 sets, okay? Now the reps on that can be completely variable, but then again, we're in a time crunch. If we're doing the winning warm-ups like we've been talking about for over a year now, which you should be doing, you're gonna have to dictate about 12 to 14 minutes on the winning warm-up. You're gonna have anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes, whether it's max or speed. That's only gonna leave you around 20 or 25 minutes for accessories, meaning 3 to 4 sets of that is really hauling ass. So as you can see, also the adjustment of sets are limited due to the amount or the time constraint that you have, which is about 50 to 60 minutes. I find that this law is completely screwed up, and a lot of people don't do it because they overtrain. You know, most people, I work out 2 hours a day in the gym. You're really wasting your time after 60 minutes. So law of accommodation can also be adjusted in sets, but as you can see, we're still limited in that. The next thing that we can play with to help keep law of accommodation at bay is we can use tempos. Now, for powerlifting, we always tend to want the concentric movement of the actual exercise to be explosive, but we can really mess with the eccentric movement to increase more time under tension. So for a lot of us, or hopefully, a 3-second eccentric is going to be a really powerful tool, as well as a 5-second eccentric. I would say 99% of the time using eccentrics, it's either one or the other. So if I'm going to do a 5-rep max squat, but I'm only going to use a 3-second tempo down or a 5-second tempo down, that's going to limit a little bit on how much I can move, but it's also going to change the exercise. So as you can see, we're modifying and manipulating how to do some of the same exercises. So for you with limited equipment, we're getting ready to release a minimal manual. And what I mean by that is minimal equipment. So we have a minimal time manual. Now we're going to have a minimal equipment manual. Tempos are going to be a huge factor in changing the lift on the body, which is trying to stay away from or letting our body accommodate to the training. What we want to do is when we do exercises, we want the exercise to be unfamiliar to the body. Once we create familiarity, we're not really creating real strength. We're actually creating a comfortability. So the body is always going to get efficient at movements before it gets stronger at them. That's why I like using a conjugate style thought pattern on how to train, because if you haven't seen an exercise for 12, 15, or upwards of 20 weeks, and you come back to that exercise and get stronger at it, you actually got stronger because you didn't master the movement. So the body will always try to find the easiest way to get strong. And what you have to do is you have to keep it from accommodating to what you're trying to do. Therefore, you create real strength, in my opinion. So using tempos, we can use a 5-second eccentric, or we can use a 3-second eccentric. Now this can be used for max or speed days, and also accessories. Okay, so we can do our different movements using 3 and 5-second eccentrics, but on the accessories, we can also add in concentrics, which would look like this: 5-5 tempo or 3-3 tempo. Now, I don't like using concentric parts of movements in core lifts, i.e. squat, benching, and deadlifting. I don't like using those in tempos on the concentric movement. So for squat, bench press, and deadlift, it's always boom, as fast as you can go upward. But on the downward phase, you can play with it. Now on a tricep extension, let's say we got done benching or squatting, hamstring curls and push downs and things of that nature, if last week we just kind of did our own tempo naturally, the next week we could do the same exercise and do it a 5-5 tempo, and the muscles will be completely shocked because it accommodated to your natural speed, and now we've just put the brakes on that speed and made it super slow. It's going to act to the body completely different. So as you can see, tempos can also be a major player in law of accommodation. The most powerful thing you can change in law of accommodation, in my personal opinion, is the mode. And what does that mean? That means the exercise. So if we take the exercise and we completely make it something completely different every week, then what's going to end up happening is the body is going to have to adjust to that every week. Now there's some great advantages to this. One of the big advantages to changing the mode is not only does the body not follow law of accommodation, it's actually getting a new stimulus every week. but you're also keeping away from all these little aches and pains and injuries because you're not putting the pressure in the same exact point in the same exact place all the time. You're changing it. So yes, we do bench press heavy every week, but we change the mode of that bench press every week. So now the joints stay healthy, and now we're actually able to keep pushing harder. So usually the fastest way to get better is to specifically do the exact same thing all the time. But eventually what you find is that you're gonna have to do more and more and more of that specific thing. And now you're gonna be dealing with overuse injuries because those exact joint pressors are getting hit all the time. So you see a lot of people that use linear periodization with the exact same movements all the time. They have either lengthy off seasons or they retire early because of this situation, in my opinion.